Hello, welcome. Today we're sharing a Vedic perspective on evolution. Evolution is one of the huge points of contention between the evolutionists and anybody who believes in any sort of religion, right? Because most religions believe in the creation theory that God created everything and everybody, while the evolutionists believe it evolved from matter most times. What the Vedas offer that is different from, say, Christianity in this debate is in the Vedas, it is commonly understood that mankind has existed for billions of years, which lines up definitely not exactly, but much more reconcilably with the scientific perspective on evolution than, say, the Christian version, which says, the Earth itself hasn't even been around for more than 10,000 years, and it's really awkward. It's really awkward to hold that position in the face of science, as are many positions that you find in religion. But at least the Vedas line up a little better with the scientists in that regard. They also account for the spectrum that we see in the evolution of animals and creatures. However, they ultimately still side with the Christians in that it's all created by God. The Vedic perspective is that it's all actually created at the same time. All the species existed at the same, they were created at the same time. The spectrum that we see of evolution is real though, and it's actually an evolution of consciousness. So even just in like a morning that we have as a person, right? Let's say the very moment you wake up in the morning, your consciousness is at a reduced state, right? You're hearing some sounds, you're not even really processing what they are yet, right? And you slowly become more awake and more conscious. So in this way, the Vedas assert that consciousness, not matter, is the prime creator of all the various forms. The desire of the soul and of God is the starting point and the creating force of everything that we see. The whole spectrum of different forms are to accommodate different levels of consciousness as well as different desires. So this is a book called Jaiva Dharma that's talking about this. Let me start right here with the introduction, which talks about it in short. In the 16th chapter of this book, there is a minute analysis consistent with modern science of the systematic development of consciousness. Conscious beings who are bound by illusion are found in 5 conditions. 1. Covered consciousness. 2. Stunted consciousness. 3. Budding consciousness. 4. Blossoming consciousness. And 5. Fully blossomed consciousness. Such conscious beings are known as jivas or prani. So even just hearing that much, you can kind of imagine how that maps onto the spectrum of evolution. Because it's all, in the Vedic perspective, every living being has a soul. And every soul has consciousness to some degree. And that consciousness is of the same quality. The same quality as God himself, actually. So that's why we have this spectrum that appears to be an evolution. It's actually an evolution of various stages of consciousness. Most are probably aware that in the Vedic or Indian traditions, they believe in reincarnation. So we reincarnate, we carry with us a subtle body through millions of gross physical bodies. That subtle body carries our desires and our level of consciousness. And by that state of consciousness and the desires, we become affiniated with, attracted to, we enter into a form that matches that state of consciousness and those desires. And it is a developmental process of becoming more and more and more conscious. And we can see this when we look at various different animal species. We can see varying levels of consciousness through those animal species up to the human being. I've even heard in some modern debates that I watched that, a 3-year-old has the consciousness level of like a cow or a pig or something. Like, I don't remember the exact animal. But the point is that they're measuring like how conscious a human being is at a particular stage in life by comparing it to animals, which is very interesting when most of the people saying that don't believe the animals have a soul. Which is another point of contention, I think, that Christians struggle with. They're saying that humans have a soul, but animals don't. They have all these symptoms. They have all these symptoms of consciousness, of feeling. They even respond to love, but we want to deny that they have a soul. That's why most Vedic traditions, not all, but most, are vegetarian. Because we believe these other animals have a soul. We believe in karma. That we're whatever we put out, we're going to experience the reaction of. So this is the Vedic perspective on evolution. So while that would still come in some contention with the evolutionists, of course, the evolutionists want to assert that at some random point, the various minerals, chemicals that were being washed around the universe started to like accidentally retain some form, and at some point one of those forms decided, I like this particular form, I am my own identity separate from the rest of the matter all around me, and I want to preserve my form, I want to survive and reproduce. That's quite a leap of faith if you ask me, but that's what they assert happened, which is, I think, one of the best arguments against evolution and for creationism, is that when did dirt or whatever other things, when it decide that this particular clump of it was a thing that needed to be preserved and reproduce? At what point does matter do that, right? When it's humid enough, when the temperature is just right. But then you look at the opposite side, right? It's like, well, what's the opposite side? The Earth's only 5,000, 10,000 years old, and God created them on this day, right? And so consider the Vedic perspective on this. Yes, evolution, as it appears, is a real thing, but we did not evolve. The evolution is a reflection of a spectrum of consciousness. Souls at various levels of consciousness enter the material energy because the dimension they're coming from is beyond time. So some souls are coming in right at the human level of consciousness. Some are at the cow level, the horse level, the dolphin level. Is that higher or lower than human? I'm not sure. Some are at the level of a blade of grass. A blade of grass. Their consciousness is so covered. But that's why there's a spectrum, because it's all the same quality of consciousness. All these entities that are unique individuals are all also of the same quality of consciousness, developing. We can go up or down. It's not only up. We can also go down. And all of these species have existed for hundreds of millions, billions even, years. So that at least lines up a little bit better with what scientists are seeing in their discoveries of, this is this many years old, that is that many years old. At least we don't have to say the Earth is only 10,000 years old and argue that position, right? And I'm not trying to convince anybody, but this is a position you might not have thought of, and it's not an apologetic position. I'm not making this position up to reconcile it with modern science. I'm not saying, oh, well, now I better change my position so that it matches with science so I look more respectable. This is the Vedic position. It's in the scriptures, is what it says in there. And again, these are the oldest scriptures, oldest writings, period, on the earth. So this is what the Vedas have been saying long before science had anything to say about it. So it's not an apologetic position. It's got some credibility. And I'm not trying to put down Christianity at all, honestly, but it's hard, well, what I said, to not take offense, but honestly, like, I think possibly some things were interpreted too literally, right? I don't know. I'm not a Christian scripture expert. I'm sharing with you the Vedic perspective on it. And I'm sharing it with you because whatever you may believe all religion and spirituality is just nonsense, but I hope that this is probably a perspective that you didn't even know about. It's an ancient perspective that a big percentage of the planet's population know and hold. They're just separated from our Western culture. to a large degree. And I think it's interesting. I think it's whatever you ultimately believe, it's very interesting to think of. What if you were once a blade of grass and your consciousness is evolving through all these forms? So that's the long and short of it. If all you wanted to get was a taste, you've had enough. But I'm going to flesh it out for you if you're interested. So check out this picture. It's a picture of 4 separate pictures. The 4 faces of karma. On the top left, you got a woman. On the left side, you can see she's posing on the cover of a magazine, right? So her consciousness is very into, posing and being seen as beautiful. So then you see in the middle, half it's got a human face and the other half's tree face, and on the right, she becomes a tree in a similar pose, right? If you look to the right of that, there's a man who's cutting up some meat. It's like, oh yeah. And then in the middle, you see his face, and then half like a tiger's face, and on the far right, you see a tiger, the same kind of energy, the same kind of consciousness, reflecting where his karma will take him. Then in the bottom left, you got someone who just likes to lay and sleep a lot, so they're becoming a bear. And then there's a man who just loves eating all this delicious stuff, and then he becomes a pig, right? So let me quickly read this. A living entity in the material world carries different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. And these are carried through the subtle body. That's an addition of mine. Back to the reading. Thus he takes one kind of body, and again quits it to take another. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created by his repeated habits and activities and the consciousness he developed in his lifetime, right, will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he is sure to change to a cat's or a dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change to the form of a demigod. And if he is in God consciousness, Krishna consciousness, or God consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka, or God's place in the spiritual world, and associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to his karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karsati, or the struggle for existence. So how is all this working? How is all this arranged? Where does God come in? It sounds like I'm just talking about karma, right? Well, let's simultaneously answer that question and also get a little bit more of a detailed description of these different states of consciousness, from, almost completely covered to blossoming to completely aware consciousness. Let's go into that a little bit for those who are interested. So this is a conversation. This book, Jaiva Dharma, it's in kind of story form with conversations between characters. So one character is Brajanath, and he's asking Babaji, right? So Brajanath says, if the soul performs karma and experiences pains and pleasures, where is the question of God's active involvement? And in response, Babaji is going to go over the different forms of consciousness. Babaji says, the soul is the instrumental cause. And when he performs karma, God acts as the efficient cause and arranges for the fruits of that karma, and the soul is eligible to enjoy. God also arranges for future karma, for which the soul has become eligible. In short, God awards the fruits, while the jiva enjoys them. Rajanath says, how many types of souls are there? There are 5 kinds, namely those whose consciousness is completely covered, those whose consciousness is shrunken or contracted, those whose consciousness is budding slightly, those with developed consciousness, and those with fully developed consciousness. Which souls have completely covered consciousness? There are souls with the bodies of trees, creepers, grass, stone, and so on, who have forgotten service to God, and are so engrossed in the material qualities of illusion that they no longer appear to even be sentient. There's only a slight indication of their sentience through the 6 transformations. This is the lowest stage of the soul's fall, and this fact is corroborated by the epic stories of etc. etc. One only reaches this stage because of some grave offense, and one can only be delivered from it by God's mercy. So here we have an interesting connection with Christianity of the idea of original sin. So the more we sin, the more we go into these lower states of consciousness and experience the results of our actions. So it actually is kind of a sin that puts us into this world of disease, death, decay, discomfort, right? And sin, though, this is an interesting thing you might not have known. The word sin actually comes from the ancient medieval England, and it was used in archery tournaments. That's its actual origin. Go ahead and look it up. When somebody was in an archery tournament and they shot and they missed the bullseye, the referee will call out the word sin. So the idea of sin is actually not meant to carry all this guilt and all this shame. It's meant to be an indication that you're missing the mark so you can adjust your aim for your next shot. That's it, right? So we have original sin, but in that sense. Which souls have contracted consciousness? Beasts, birds, snakes, fish, aquatics, mosquitoes, and various similar creatures have shrunken or contracted consciousness. The consciousness of these souls is apparent to some degree, unlike that of the souls in the previous group, whose consciousness is completely covered. For example, these souls perform activities such as eating, sleeping, free movement, and quarreling with others for things that they consider to be their property. They also show fear, and they become angry when they see injustice. However, they have no knowledge of the spiritual world. Even monkeys have some scientific understanding in their mischievous minds, for they have some idea of what will or will not happen in the future, and they also have the quality of being grateful. Some animals have good knowledge about various objects too, but despite all these attributes, they do not have a propensity for inquiring about God or about the absolute truth, and so their consciousness is contracted. Which souls have slightly budding consciousness? Conditioned souls with human bodies fall into 3 categories. Those with slightly budding consciousness, those with developed consciousness, and those with fully developed consciousness. Generally, the human race can be divided into 5 groups. 1. The immoral atheists. 2. Moral atheists. 3. Moral theists, who have both morals and faith in God. 4. Those who are engaged in sadhana bhakti, which is devotional practice. And 5. Those who are engaged in bhav bhakti. And those are those who are having transcendental realizations even while they're in this body, and they're feeling these transcendental sentiments in this life. Those who are knowingly or unknowingly atheists are either immoral or moral atheists. When a moral person develops a little faith in God, he is then called a moral theist. Those who develop interest in sadhana bhakti, the practice according to the tenets of Scripture, are called sadhana bhaktas, and those who have developed some unalloyed love for God, means no longer contaminated, the pure nature, are called bhav bhaktas. Both immoral and moral atheists have slightly budding consciousness. Moral theists and practitioners have developed consciousness, and the bhav bhaktas have fully developed consciousness. Now, one last thing I'd like to say about this is that I'm sure that many of you, when you hear this idea of the people with developed consciousness are the ones who are practicing religion and then the ones who are having some transcendental feelings, there can be a sense that this is like an artificial, the transcendental feelings are like, oh God, but it's not. This is, the practice awakens our internal nature, our actual nature. It's not an artificial imposition. It's like a buried, covered thing that was always there that is now awakening. Let me give an example. This is also from the same book, a different part of it. Nature arises from the elementary structure of an object. By God's desire, when an object is formed, a particular nature is inherent in that structure as an eternal concomitant factor This nature is the nitya, eternal, dharma, religion of the object. The nature of a given object becomes altered or distorted when a change takes place within it, either by force of circumstance or due to contact with other objects. With the passage of time, this distorted nature becomes fixed and appears to be permanent, as if it were the eternal nature of that object. This distorted nature is not the true nature. It is called nisarga, that nature which is acquired through long-term association. This nisarga occupies the place of the factual nature and becomes identified as the true nature. For example, water is an object and its true nature is liquidity. When water solidifies due to certain circumstances and becomes ice, the acquired nature of solidity takes the place of its inherent nature. In reality, this acquired nature is not eternal, rather it is occasional or temporary. It arises because of some cause, and when that cause is no longer effective, this acquired nature vanishes automatically. However, the true nature is eternal. It may become distorted, but it still remains inseparably connected to its object. And the original nature will certainly become evident again when the proper time and circumstances arise. The sentimental part of me really loves this example of water, because when we hear about things like love of God, or even just love, it seems like almost such an unreal concept to us, right? But I think it's because our hearts are frozen. I do believe there is a transcendental reality of love, and I think most, if not all of us, at some point in our lives have had some taste of that. We've been given some tiny drop of taste of it. We might have dismissed it under whatever umbrella or reasoning, but I think we've all felt that we have this deeper state of being that is full of love. We might have had our heart touched at some point in our lives, but I think for the most part, we're all frozen solid. We're solid blocks of ice, and we've been frozen so long that that liquid state of a liquid heart that's melted seems unnatural because we've been frozen so long. In fact, in the Vedic perspective is that we've been frozen since time immemorial, cannot even be remembered. Our consciousness is eternal. It's ever existing since the beginning of time. That's how long we've existed. And who knows, perhaps most of that time, billions of years, we've had a frozen heart. And it's a great epic journey of melting and blossoming into a higher state of being. And we finally come to this human form. And who knows where we can go from here. Accordingly, the words anadi bahirmukh are used, meaning that the soul has been diverted since time without beginning. From the moment of this diversion and the soul's entry into Maya, the illusion, or the material world, his nitya dharma, his eternal nature, has become perverted. Therefore, by the association of this illusion, the soul develops nisarga, an acquired nature, which thus facilitates the display of his temporary function and disposition, known as naimittika dharma. The nitya dharma, eternal function, is one, indivisible and faultless in all situations. But the temporary function assumes many different forms when seen in diverse circumstances and when it is described in various ways by men of divergent opinions. Having spoken thus, Paramahamsa Babaji stopped and began to chant Sri Hari Nam Japa. Hari Nam Japa is chanting God's names. God, being a transcendental object, is in his name. Hearing this explanation of spiritual truths, Sannyasi Thakur offered his prostrated obeisances and said, Prabhu, I shall deliberate on all these topics today. Tomorrow I shall submit to your lotus feet any questions that may arise. Thus ends the first chapter of Jaiva Dharma, entitled The Eternal and Temporary Dharmas of the Jiva. What a wonderful book. I'm going to link the free PDF download in the video description. I hope nobody was offended. Please understand if you felt any offense. It's not my intention. My intention is only to share the Vedic perspective. And please forgive me. Hope you guys all have a great day. See you next time.